people from Voorheesville will recognize behind Bob is Tork Hill. And his book is called Tork's Hill and Mead's Pond, and it features those two men who provided winter recreation to generations of Voorheesville villagers. So just tell us a little about what made you decide to write this book.
Well, I was actually working on a different project, and it mentioned in passing Tork's Hill and Mead's Pond, and then I just got to thinking, well, what if I took that out of it and did those on their own? And I just started talking to people. One thing led to another, and you just start learning about the history. I wasn't sure what I was going to do on it, just finding more information about it and seeing if people enjoyed it as much as I did. And
well, you talked to a lot of people. Reading your acknowledgments, there were more than 25. How did you find them? Are they people that you knew from your childhood, or?
A few of them I did, but most of them are off Facebook. Because actually, what spurred me was Diane Wozniak's drawings and her paintings. Again, I had been thinking about something like this for a number of years, and it was about 2 years ago, she had a post on Facebook, and it included her drawing. And at that point, I just said, I need to do this now. It's time. I put it off long enough, start doing it. And I saw all the comments from her post. People loved it. And so I reached out to a handful of those people through Facebook, and then I would talk with them for 15, 20 minutes, sometimes an hour, and then they would suggest somebody else. Oh, you need to talk to so-and-so, and oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. So that's the majority of the people I knew or knew of, but I really hadn't been in contact in many years. So that was fun doing that.
Yeah, so people know the backdrop painting is by Diane Wozniak, and our readers might be familiar with her because she frequently will have displays and will run a picture in the paper when they're on display at the Voorheesville Library, for instance. And it's just kind of like she's the Grandma Moses of, not in terms of age, but in terms of, capturing the place for Voorheesville.
I saw her when I first saw her drawing. I'm not sure. I think I saw Tork's Hill first, and then I saw Mead's Pond, and I was just like, wow, I need to reach out to her too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wonderful. So what was this project you were working on originally that you mentioned both Mead's Pond and Tork's Hill?
It was just something I've been going back and forth in my head for a number of years. Didn't really pan out or anything. It did have some ties to Voorheesville, but nothing has come of it yet. I don't know if anything will.
So it's a mystery.
It's just something that kind of mentioned those places in passing, and just thought,
tell us about growing up in Voorheesville. Were you born into where? Tell us about your family. Who are they? Are they still your parents still alive?
No, they. My father passed in 2004. My mother 5 years later. They lived in Voorheesville. Let's see, 1960. They were one of the first homeowners in the development across from. When I was growing up, it was the Grand Union, but I guess now it's Hannaford. Mm-hmm. There were, I think I counted one time 25 or 30 homes in that. They lived there from 1960 to the mid 1990s. Got two older sisters and a younger brother.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father worked for the state, and my mother, for the early part of our childhood, she was, a homemaker, and then she was a receptionist at a doctor's office. We just had a wonderful time.
Well, tell us about a Voorheesville childhood. What made it wonderful?
Just you could go anywhere. We used to ride our bikes everywhere or walk down into the village or behind the house. Bly Creek ran not too far from our house, so we would go down there and go fishing sometimes. And just, the neighborhoods were great, and the neighbors were all fantastic. Would go out, just play baseball in the streets or stickball or something at night, kick the can or the typical childhood things.
But here's the thing. It's no longer typical.
Right.
We just had a snowstorm here, and I said to the photographer, go out and take a picture of kids playing in the snow. And, kids these days are so hooked into their screens and their video games. And tell me a little about the sense of place that you have, because it really comes through in your book. And there's been so much research done on sense of place and how it's disintegrating in our modern world. Just
every time I think of that growing up there in the village, it just brings a smile to my face, and it's wonderful. I'm sure I had some angst growing up at some point or some rough moments, but I don't remember any of that. I remember just, the fun times and all the stuff we got to do, and just a wonderful place. In where I live now, I see some of that. This is a little bit bigger area where I am now, but it is still very rural. And it reminds me a little bit of kind of everybody knows everybody, or just about. And that was the same growing up in Voorheesville.
So tell us a little about these two men. We'll start with Dominic Tork. I'd always heard of him because of Tork's Hill, but just to kind of put flesh on the bones of what we'd heard, just kind of fill people in. I was surprised he was born in 1917, because that seems like a whole different era.
Right. I didn't know that much about him other than through, Tork's Hill. But in talking to his grandkids, it was just learning about him and all he had done for the village. I think I mentioned in there that he wasn't necessarily a village founder, but one of a handful of people who just had a lot to do with the growth of the village. He owned the mobile station for years and years and years. He was on the school board for years. Just very involved, very, very involved with the community, and I think he loved doing that. He grew up on, I think it was he was born on Grove Street, I believe.
Right. That's what your book says. Yeah.
Near the hotel. So
his father had come from Italy and ran a grocery store on Main Street, and they lived on Grove. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think he had a sense of that community thing too. Lived there, for, I think it was a short time. He may have lived in Bern, but he was never really far. And a lot of the same with Coach Mead. Now, I didn't know him that well either, because my first year of high school was 77, 78. I think that was about when he retired. Maybe he retired just before that. So I knew all the stories about him, and everyone, of course, you grow up there, you know of him. But I didn't have any personal reaction. I did not take any driving classes with him.
I think I would have found his sense of humor a little disconcerting at the wheel. Some of the things that you mentioned.
Everyone I talked to, that was one of the first things. Even if they were skating at Mead's Pond, they remembered him first as the driving instructor. And that was quite interesting. But everyone laughed. If I would ask them, when the words Coach Mead come to mind, or when you hear those, what comes to mind? And just about everybody laughed. They'd chuckle and say, "Oh, he was funny. He was fun. Great person to be around." And again, with the profession He was in, he's a teacher in education, so kids were important to him. And he was a lifelong resident, other than when he went to college. They just
Ithaca College, right? For physical education instruction?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, some of the things, though, were so jarring. Like he would ask people about being in jail.
That was his sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I think everyone enjoyed it. And for the most part, they knew he was joking, but it's just one of those things that, for a split second, you think about it. And, and because he knew everybody too. So when he was talking to these kids, he knew their parents. So, maybe he was onto something when he was joking with them. He's just a different sense of humor.
So did you pick a passage of your book that you could read to us, just one short vignette so people can get an idea of the flavor of it?
I guess so. I had two in my. I guess I'll do it from the introduction. Generations have created long-lasting memories, along with a few bumps and bruises at those landmarks. While the bumps and bruises have long faded, most of them anyway, the memories are as vivid and bright as those winter days of our youth. The men behind those winter wonderlands, Dominic, Tork, and Harold Mead, passed away years ago, but not before their dreams of providing a place for kids to be kids reached many lives. In the case of Tork's Hill, it still is providing memories.
Very nice, yeah.
To me, it's about them. I wrote it, but I think if it weren't for them and all the people who were willing to share their memories, I was just the conduit, I guess you could say, of it. It's all about those two men and everyone else who just enjoyed the hill as much as I did.
Who should read this book? Who's the audience?
I would say anybody. But I think I knew when I started it would be kind of a targeted audience. I'm not sure how many people outside of Voorheesville or the Albany area or who were familiar with it would appreciate it as much, or it may be harder to reach those. I think anybody can, because I think even if you didn't grow up there, I think you could take away a sense of maybe you had a place like that in your childhood or wherever you grew up. It might not be, Tork's Hill and Mead's Pond, but I'm assuming there have to be some places like this in other communities, whether it's in the Albany area or, anywhere in the United States. So I think anybody could, but it would just be reaching out to those, and maybe a little harder for those people to, I guess, find it or think about, well, why should I read this? For the ones who are from that area, once you say Tork's Hill and Mead's Pond, I think people understand.
Yeah, well, what's so unusual, you mentioned Tork's Hill is still going strong. That's because the village bought it to make it stay a sledding area. But it's just so unusual that two men on their own as private property owners. Now we're in such an era of litigation where people are worried about, liability when they do things like that. But they would just open up their property for public use. And it sounds especially like Harold Mead went to a lot of extra work with music piped in and night lighting. And you describe it as a safe haven, a place where kids could just gather and be kids.
Yeah, I mean, everyone loved that place. And yeah, for both of them, you look back, you're not sure it would happen. I mean, Tork's Hill is still going on, but you're not sure if it would have been started today, just because of all the possible legal issues. But at that time, no one thought about it. And I'm sure some people maybe suffered some minor injuries there. I think if I remember correctly, I believe one of my sisters chipped a tooth there, but you never thought of going to sue them or anything. And someone probably may have broken a bone here or there. I don't know. But just no one, they thought, well, it's our responsibility. We're the ones that are decided to go down that hill. No one forced us. So it is, I think, even more remarkable when you compare it to this day and age.
Yeah, really. It's in your lifetime and in my lifetime, but it seems like a world apart.
Right.
So tell us about your lifetime. Just kind of walk us through what happened after you graduated from Clayton A. Boughton. What was the next step?
I went to college in Lakeland, Florida Southern College. It was a small college in the middle of the state. Studied journalism and broadcasting, got into the newspaper business, spent a few years at the local paper there. Then my wife and I moved to California. We were in Southern California for 4 years, working at newspapers. And then we came back to the East Coast, and we've been in Virginia since 1994. Again, I was working at newspapers up until 2017. And I was, vast majority of the time, I was a page designer, an editor, and an assistant sports editor. But I have done some writing, and in the past 6-7 years, my freelance writing has picked up. So I've done a lot more of that, and I've covered everything, mostly sports, from high school sports to college sports to Major League Baseball, the NBA, professional golf. I've also covered, business, health, science, a little bit of everything.
Wow.
It's been
So
wonderful.
did these early Voorheesville experiences shape you in any way that you can, pull out an example or a tangible moment?
Oh, I do remember when I was in high school, it was my sophomore year, I kept stats for the football team. And then a few years later, when I was in college working at the local paper, one of the first things you cover is high school football. And I remember the stat sheet that Coach Buckley used, or he had me use. And I said, I need to get my hands on that because it was very easy to keep track of everything. So my brother was still in high school at the time. And I think I asked him, hey, go to Coach Buckley's office, get copies of those stat sheets and send me some. But I think just the overall sense of, how lucky we were to grow up there. I've never taken it for granted. And it's a lot of things I heard when I was talking to people. They would say, boy, how lucky we were. And, I think that's it. Everybody knew everybody. They were friends with everybody. Nobody, at least I never saw any major problems. And I think people got along, were accepting of everybody. I just everything was a wonderful experience. I mean, I know I was a paper boy too, and there were some homes I would go to, and I wouldn't just put the paper between their doors. There were a few people that like the door would be open at 6:30 in the morning, and I would just kind of take a step in and toss it on their kitchen table. You can't do that now. But people invited me to kind of do that, and were accepting of it, and just, I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah. Well, it's just, you captured this feeling in the book, this sense of community is really what it is.
Yes.
And in the midst of winter sports, where lots of people these days just stay inside, and there you and all your friends were, just embracing winter life. And Yeah, it's a very nice tribute. So do you have things in mind that you're going to be working on going forward as a writer? Are you still working or are you retired?
Yes, I'm still working. I work at a community college in their marketing and communications. So I write stories about their programs, their professors, their students, anything that affects the college. But yeah, I'm always working on something. I don't know what's going to come next. I haven't really thought about that too much, but some people have already asked me, yeah, are you going to do any more history things? Yeah, I don't know. Again, in some ways, I just kind of stumbled on this, so I don't know. Probably something at some point, but.
And what was the experience like working with Troy Bookmakers? They're the ones that put together the book.
They were wonderful.
Yeah.
They guided me through everything, answered all my questions, helped me distribute them, because living out of the area, that was one of my concerns, is how do I get it to people who want it? And because there will be some people who don't want to go online, or maybe don't want to go to a bookstore to get it. So how can I get it to people in Voorheesville?
Yeah, I should probably read this list. It's quite a list. You've got Northern Barrel, Pretty All Right Breakfast Club, Indian Ladder Farms, Romo's Pizza, and then the village offices, and the New Scotland Historic Association. So that in itself is a testament to community, these small businesses that will sell a book when they're not booksellers,
Right. That's been amazing. The reaction from them that I got, and just their willingness to help out. I didn't know what to expect. I just figured, well, it can't hurt me to ask them. If they say yes, great. If they say no, well, I would understand. And I do have to say, Northern Barrel actually reached out to me, Chris Geary from there. He saw the project I was doing, and he said, "Hey, we'd love to have you, come here for like a meet the author type thing." And I wish I could, but it's just it's difficult for me.
Too far away. Yeah.
Yeah, and the problem being the only time I have available would be the week right before New Year's. And I know there's already a lot of snow on the ground, and you're probably going to get more. So I didn't want to be in a situation where I start driving up there and halfway through you hit a big storm. And an interesting thing too with Northern Barrel, just as I found out one of the owners, I actually went to a baseball camp with him years ago, Chuck Rosenstein in the mid '70s, and it's just like I hadn't heard that name in years. And
so you rediscovered old allegiances and friendships as you went through this process.
There were a bunch of those. It's I'm talking with some people that I haven't talked to in high school, or maybe I knew of them in high school, and if they're not in your grade when you're in high school, they're so much older or younger. You usually don't associate with people outside of your grade too much. But I've been talking with people that, 3 or 4 years younger or older, and that's been really fun. Just talking to those names that you recognize. It's kind of like, in some ways, a trip down memory lane, which is always fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned several people that had generations of their families using Torks Hill.
Right.
Yeah, but your own kids, you were already in Virginia then, so that didn't.
My son was back there once when he was about a year old, but we didn't go down the hill.
Yeah.
We just haven't been able to get. The few times I have been back has been in the summer. So, but maybe one year we will definitely get back there in the winter, and hopefully when there's snow on the ground.
So what haven't I asked you that you would like people to know? I sometimes miss the obvious question. What haven't we touched on that you think is important?
I don't know. I'm used to being on the other side of these interviews. I'm more comfortable asking the questions than answering them. But no, I think that covers it. It's just, a wonderful time. And I thought, well, if I enjoyed these places so much, maybe other people did too. So that's why I tried it. And Troy Bookmakers was great. And I just figured, well, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but it's something I learned. And it's just been a great experience. Almost every every day I get a message from somebody or there's a response. So it's been really nice.
So people that have picked up the book reach out to you and let you know. Oh,
yeah,
nice.
a few of them have,
Yeah.
or they've made a comment on social media. So it's been quite enjoyable.